Mitsuko rose before the sun painted the sky with soft pastels. She slipped into her plain gray cleaning uniform and tied her hair back in a neat bun. The uniform was simple, without any badge or name tag. A small dustpan and broom hung from her belt. Before anyone else arrived, she walked through the still corridors of the office building. The lights were dim and the air smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner. Her steps were quiet, almost reverent, as if she moved through sacred space. The halls echoed with nothing but the faint hum of a fluorescent bulb. In that calm hour, she took in every detail. She noticed a scuff on the wall near the elevator and gently rubbed it away with a damp cloth. She straightened a crooked picture frame in the lobby before sweeping the entranceway. There was something soothing about starting each day in silence. To her, those first moments belonged only to her and the building itself. By the time daylight fully arrived, other employees began to trickle in. They wore crisp suits or pressed dresses. Their coffee cups burned hot in their hands as they hurried to their offices. Some carried briefcases or portfolios filled with papers. A few paused to greet the security guard at the desk, smiling and exchanging small talk about the weather or last night's news. Mitsuko remained unseen. To most of them, she was just the cleaner who appeared each morning with her broom and bucket of soapy water. She moved through the crowd with careful grace, pushing a cart loaded with supplies. The wheels squeaked softly on the tile floor. No one paused to watch her. They walked right past, eyes fixed on their smartphones or the open paths to their desks. They did not notice the gentle confidence in her posture or the faint smile at the corners of her lips, as if she knew something they did not. She began her rounds at the back of the building, where the offices of junior staff clustered in small cubicles. She knelt beside a desk that had papers and a half-empty cup of tea. As she wiped the surface, she noticed a thin layer of dust hiding under a stack of invoices. She swept it away without a thought, but in her mind she reviewed the numbers on those invoices. She remembered reading an article the night before about a competitor company's failed product launch. It occurred to her that her own team could avoid similar mistakes with a careful review of quality standards, but she could not say a word. Here, she was only Mitsuko the cleaner, not Mitsuko the owner and strategist. Still, she stored every observation in her memory. When a loose paperclip rolled under a chair, she lifted it with her finger and returned it to a small box of supplies on a nearby shelf. Every detail mattered to her, even a stray paperclip. Voices drifted down the hallway as she moved toward the central offices. She heard two young analysts whispering behind the glass walls of their office. "Did you see her? She's the one who cleans up after us," one said with a slight laugh. "Honestly, what can she know about numbers and charts? Let her stick to mopping floors." The other analyst smirked and nodded. Mitsuko paused to straighten a crooked coaster on a desk. She only smiled, a hint of patience in her eyes. She did not confront them. She had learned long ago that anger would not serve her here. Instead, she listened carefully to their words, noting the names on their ID badges, Yuki Sato and Haru Tanaka. Tanaka. It was a common name, but it made her curious. She wondered if they were aware that she carried the family name only by coincidence and not by relation. Still, she silently filed away their words. She would not forget the way they spoke, as if she were invisible. As she walked past the manager's glass office, she overheard more of the same. "She's nothing but a cleaner," said a middle-aged woman, adjusting her glasses. "I don't know why she even bothers coming here. She'll never be part of our team." The manager arranged a set of files on her desk. She glanced out at Mitsuko as she swept beneath the manager's chair. Mitsuko bent low and swept quietly, listening to the soft clicking of the woman's pens. Every so often, the manager tapped her foot impatiently, annoyed at the slow progress of her assistant. Yet when Mitsuko finished, the manager lifted her gaze briefly and said, "All right, that's enough, you can go now." The words were not harsh, but they carried a hidden dismissiveness. As Mitsuko rose and backed out of the room, she enclosed her feelings in a quiet resolve. She could not let such comments shake her. She had come here for a reason, and she would not abandon her purpose because they looked down on her. In the lunchroom, workers gathered around tables, eating bento boxes or fast food sandwiches. Some tapped on their laptops, preparing for afternoon meetings. A pair of salespeople joked about a recent commission. A junior designer flipped through sketches for a new brochure. Mitsuko wheeled her cart in, ready to wipe down tables and sweep crumbs from the floor. As she worked, she heard an older staff member say, "I heard the owner is some big shot who brags about her academic record. But look at her now. She's scrubbing floors. How strange." Another laughed and shook his head. Mitsuko paused and looked at the older man, whose name tag read Koichiro. She straightened her back and met his eyes for a moment before bending to mop the floor. Koichiro's face reddened, but he quickly returned to his meal. He did not know her name. He did not know that she had founded this very company years ago. He did not know that every penny in her paycheck came from the profits she had earned, with her own hands and mind. She would keep this truth close to her chest, revealing it only when the time was right. While sweeping the break area, Mitsuko took in the rhythms of the day. She listened to the distant hum of printers at work. She noticed that the air conditioning was set on high, perhaps wasting energy. She saw that the microwave in the corner had a broken handle and decided to report it later, knowing it was a small issue she could fix once she had time. She admired how some employees carefully folded their napkins, but wondered why someone left a stack of unread reports on the counter. From her vantage point on the floor, she could see the ebb and flow of people, who came early, who arrived late, who stopped for a quick coffee, and who raced back to their cubicles without a glance. In her mind, each detail was a piece of a larger puzzle. At one point, a junior accountant rushed in, her face flush with stress. She spilled a small bit of soy sauce from her lunch container onto the floor. Without hesitation, Mitsuko knelt, took a scrap of paper towel and wiped the spill. The accountant's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, fumbling with her chopsticks. "Thank you for cleaning that up." She interrupted her own apology as if embarrassed, to be grateful. Mitsuko only nodded, offering the paper towel with a gentle smile. "It's all right," she replied softly. To the accountant, Mitsuko was simply a kind cleaner doing her job. The accountant did not know that Mitsuko had once negotiated that very soy sauce contract with the food supplier, ensuring better rates for the company cafeteria. She did not know that Mitsuko knew the price of every ingredient used on the premises. The accountant left quickly, but Mitsuko stayed, mopping the floor until it gleamed as if new. Mid-morning brought a brief lull. The meeting rooms emptied, and the morning rush to finish tasks subsided. Mitsuko decided to check the supply closet, where boxes of paper and toner for printers were stored. She knelt to organize the shelves, noting that the label on one box was misspelled. She straightened the box, aligning it neatly with the others. Then she replaced an almost empty roll of paper towels with a fresh one. All the while, she listened to the distant rumble of a forklift in the warehouse section of the building. She remembered that in a few hours, a shipment of raw materials was scheduled to arrive. She mentally noted to ask the warehouse manager if they had enough staff to unload it on time. Even though she wore the uniform of a cleaner, she felt like an unseen conductor guiding a silent symphony. As she continued her work, she reflected on why she had chosen this path. She could have remained in the executive suite, issuing orders from behind a polished oak desk. Instead, she had insisted on donning the cleaner's uniform for a full month. She wanted to experience the company from the ground up. She believed that true leadership began with understanding the challenges faced by every employee, from the fountain technician in the basement to the sales director on the top floor. By blending in, she could gain insights that no board meeting could reveal, and so she went about her duties with diligence and humility, knowing that every swept floor and wiped surface brought her closer to a deeper understanding of her company. Just before noon, she entered the largest office suite in the building. It belonged to the vice president of operations, a tall man named Suzuki. He was on a call, his voice low but tense. Mitsuko knelt by his desk to empty a small waste paper basket. Through the glass walls, she watched him flip through a report, his brow furrowed. She noticed that the report's figures did not match the numbers in her own mental ledger. She paused, but did not speak. Instead, she made a mental note to have the correct figures sent to his office later. For now, she finished her task and retreated silently. Suzuki sighed heavily, unaware that the next report he received would fix the discrepancy. He would think it was a clerical miracle, not knowing that the cleaner had anticipated the error. Mitsuko moved through the hallways with quiet confidence, but beneath that calm exterior, she felt the familiar weight of judgment pressing down on her. Each step she took in her simple gray uniform seemed to draw more glances than the polished shoes and crisp suits of other employees. In their eyes, she was nothing more than the cleaning woman, someone to be seen but not truly noticed. This assumption frustrated her, but she refused to let it show. She had a purpose greater than their opinions, a purpose she intended to fulfill no matter how many whispered comments or sideways glances came her way. As she pushed her cleaning cart toward the executive wing, Mitsuko overheard voices drifting through the glass walls of a nearby office. A junior analyst named Yuki Sato spoke first, her tone dripping with condescension. "Honestly, I don't know why she even shows up every day. She's just a cleaner. She probably has no idea what we do in here." Her friend, a young man named Haru Tanaka, chuckled and nodded. "Right. Let her stick to mopping floors. Maybe one day she'll learn what real work looks like." Mitsuko paused to adjust a loose carpet tile just beyond their view, careful not to draw attention. In her mind, she catalogued their remarks, knowing she would remember every detail. It was not only the juniors who treated her this way, even some seniors joined in. Ms. Inoue, the head of human resources, once remarked to a colleague as Mitsuko cleaned under her desk, "I don't see why she bothers coming in. It's not like she'll ever rise above her station." The colleague nodded in agreement, saying, "Exactly. Besides, who trusts a woman who seems to prefer scrubbing floors to leading a team?" Each time Mitsuko heard such comments, she felt a familiar flicker of hurt, but it quickly gave way to resolve. She believed that actions spoke louder than words, and her actions would speak volumes when the time was right. Gender bias followed her like a shadow. Despite her neat bun and careful uniform, Mitsuko was often mistaken for someone of lower education or lesser ambition simply because she was a woman. She noticed how the men in suits straightened their ties and sleeves as they passed her, as if reminding themselves of their higher status. One afternoon, the vice president of sales, Mr. Nakamura, brushed past her without so much as a nod. When she offered to refill his water glass, he waved her off and said, "Don't mind me, I'll get it myself." His tone was polite enough, but it carried a quiet certainty that she did not belong in his world. Mitsuko simply nodded, wiped the counter, and moved on, storing his words in her mind. Cultural assumptions ran deep as well. Some colleagues whispered that she spoke too softly, as if her quiet voice made her less capable. Others assumed that, because she was Japanese, she was docile and unambitious. In fact, far from being meek, Mitsuko had built the company from the ground up 20 years ago. But these co-workers could not imagine such determination in a woman who cleaned. One morning, she passed by the marketing team brainstorming next quarter strategy. Their leader, a foreign consultant named Mr. Davis, glanced at her and smirked. "Do we really want her near our ideas? We wouldn't want our brilliant campaigns smudged by a mop." The team laughed, and Mitsuko felt a pang of disappointment, not for herself but for their loss. They were missing insights she could have shared, small suggestions that might improve their work. Yet they saw only a cleaner. It seemed that every day she walked into a wall of low expectations. When she entered the boardroom after hours to clear the floor, she overheard two managers discussing a new production schedule. One said, "I hope the supplier delivers on time. Otherwise, we'll have to push this project back another week." The other replied, "Yes, but we should check our finance reports first. I'm not sure we have enough budget left." Mitsuko paused just outside the door. She knew their budget estimates were off by nearly 10%, thanks to a recent change in raw material costs she had discovered earlier that morning while cleaning the finance department's office. If only they would take her advice. She swept the floor, straightening the chairs while silently wishing they would realize she understood more than they could imagine. Power dynamics became especially clear during staff meetings. Although Mitsuko did not attend those gatherings, she could hear the raised voices echoing through the walls as she swept the hallway outside. In one heated discussion, a project manager named Suzuki argued with the head of operations, Ms. Kuroda, about staffing levels in the factory. "We need more workers on the line," Suzuki insisted. "Otherwise, we'll miss our production targets." Kuroda replied sharply, "We don't have the budget for extra staff. The board will not approve any more hires." Suzuki slammed his fist on the table, exclaiming, "Then we will fail and you'll take the blame." Kuroda's response was calm but cold. "That's the risk you'll have to accept." Mitsuko closed her eyes briefly. She knew the real solution lay in reallocating part-time custodians to help during peak hours, a plan no one had considered because they saw her only as a cleaner. She would address it later, quietly and efficiently, proving her point without drawing attention. In the cafeteria, the biases took a different form. Some employees would purposely leave their trays halfway across the table, forcing Mitsuko to kneel and clean around them. They would tap their feet impatiently until she finished. Others would relocate crumbs onto the edge of the counter, thinking she would miss them if they placed them in shadowed corners. Once, a pair of interns knocked a smudge of grape jelly onto the floor and watched her carefully, as if daring her to catch them in their mischief. Mitsuko picked up the napkin, wiped the floor, and offered a gentle smile, saying, "Accidents happen." The interns exchanged embarrassed looks, not realizing that she knew exactly who they were and where they worked. In their haste to mock her, they revealed more about their own character than they intended. Yet amid these slights, Mitsuko found unexpected moments of kindness that surprised her. One afternoon, a young graphic designer named Aya approached her as she swept near the design department. Aya's eyes were wide and curious. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I see you here often, and I wonder, do you ever need anything? A refill on supplies? A check on a broken door handle?" Aya looked sincere, but she did not know that. For Mitsuko, these details were already in motion. The door handle had been reported, and a repair was scheduled for the next morning. Mops and brooms were already inventoried and reordered before the supplies ran low. Mitsuko knelt and met Aya's gaze. "Thank you," she said, "but everything is under control." Aya nodded, a hint of relief in her expression, and walked away. For a moment, Mitsuko felt a flicker of warmth, someone not judging her, someone seeing her as helpful, not invisible. It reminded her that change was possible, one small gesture at a time. As the day wore on, Mitsuko found herself thinking about the deeper reasons behind the prejudice. It was not just that she wore a cleaner's uniform or that she was a woman in a male-dominated field. It was the human tendency to pigeonhole people into neat boxes. Bright suits were managers, brooms belonged to cleaners, and polished shoes walked only the paths of authority. Few paused to question these boxes. They did not realize that a box might hold secrets far beyond its external appearance. Mitsuko understood this better than anyone. She had chosen this role deliberately, trading the plush office for a humble uniform so she could observe, learn, and eventually lead with greater empathy. Later that afternoon, a contractor from a local maintenance company arrived to fix a leaky pipe near the shipping dock. The contractor, Mr. Watanabe, was a burly man with calloused hands and a weathered face. He looked Mitsuko up and down, then asked, "Are you the one in charge here? Or should I talk to the office?" Mitsuko knew that usually she would be dismissed, but this time she decided to speak plainly. "I will handle this," she said calmly. "Show me where the leak is." His eyebrows shot up and he hesitated for a moment before following her. As he worked on the pipe, Mitsuko supervised quietly. She asked a few pointed questions about parts and costs. By the time he finished, Mr. Watanabe was nodding respectfully. "You really know your stuff," he admitted. Mitsuko smiled politely. "Thank you," she said, then turned away, leaving him to pack up his tools. When the clock struck 5, Mitsuko prepared to end her day. She returned her cart to the supply closet and washed the rags she had used. Her uniform was speckled with streaks of cleaning solution and a few smudges from scuffed floors. As she changed into a fresh outfit, a simple sweater and slacks, she reflected on the day's events. She thought about Yuki and Haru's dismissive remarks, Ms. Inoue's whispered judgments and the moments of kindness from Aya, and the respect from Mr. Watanabe. Each interaction reminded her of the complex web of attitudes woven into the fabric of the company. Some threads were tight with bias, others held promise for understanding. Before leaving, Mitsuko glanced at the closed doors of the conference room where the board would meet the next morning. Tomorrow, those same executives who overlooked her would plan strategies for the company's future. Tomorrow, they would still see only the cleaner in the hallways. But tomorrow, as they sat around that table, they would also be unaware that one of their own, quiet, unassuming, had insights they could not imagine. Mitsuko rose early, donned her plain gray uniform, and slipped into the building before anyone else arrived. To the few who followed her, she was just the cleaning woman, moving silently with her mop and bucket. But beneath that uniform and behind, her polite smile lay a secret. Mitsuko Tanaka was not just a member of the staff, she was the founder and majority owner of this entire company. 20 years earlier, she had taken a small loan, rented a modest workshop, and built this business from the ground up. Over time, Tanaka Industries had grown into a solid, mid-sized firm, known for reliable products and steady growth. Yet Mitsuko never forgot how it felt to stand at the bottom. She believed that to be a true leader, she needed to understand every corner of her company, from the polished boardroom to the dusty utility closet. That belief led her to spend months working incognito as a cleaner. No one here knew her name, or, if they did, they assumed it was the name on her uniform. Simply Mitsuko, the new member of the cleaning crew. On this particular morning, the machines in the back factory were silent. A critical press had broken down late the previous night, and the production staff had been struggling to fix it. If it remained idle too long, the company would face delays in delivering orders to a key client. Mitsuko knew about the breakdown, because in her rounds she had overheard the night shift foreman talking quietly on the phone before he left. He had sounded worried, and his words echoed in her mind. "If I can't get the part in by noon, we'll have to shift orders, and that will cost us thousands." So as she pushed her cart down the corridor toward the maintenance area, she carried two things: her usual cleaning supplies and a small packet of documents that detailed the part needed for the machine. Late the previous evening, under the cover of night, she had logged into the supplier's online portal and ordered the part as soon as she saw that the machine had faltered. She chose expedited shipping, knowing that speed was more important than saving a few yen. At the door to the maintenance room, she paused, took a deep breath, and knocked lightly. The maintenance supervisor, Mr. Kimura, looked up from his desk, surprised to see her cleaner's uniform in his workspace. "Mitsuko-san, what brings you here so early?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. She smiled gently and set down her bucket, then gently placed the packet of papers on his desk. "I thought you might need this," she said, keeping her voice soft and calm. Mr. Kimura peered at the documents. His eyes widened as he saw the part number and the expedited shipping confirmation. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and gratitude. She shrugged, pretending modesty, and said, "I noticed the press was down and I thought I could help." He paused for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you. This will keep us running today." As she turned and walked out, he called softly, "You're quite resourceful, Mitsuko-san." She paused at the door, gave a small bow, and smiled. "I just want things to work smoothly," she replied. Inside, her heart beat a little faster, but she kept her face calm. The repair part would arrive before noon, and the machine would hum back to life. The managers would get their report showing no significant downtime, none of them guessing that a cleaner had saved the day. Later that morning, Mitsuko moved quietly through the warehouse corridor, where large boxes of supplies were stacked neatly on metal shelves. As she swept the concrete floor, she noticed a pile of plastic bags filled with what looked like recyclable materials: cardboard scraps, empty plastic containers, and flattened paperboard. The bags sat near a corner where the janitorial staff normally picked them up. But today, Mitsuko saw something that the others had overlooked. The bags were sealed in ordinary black trash bags instead of clear recycling bags. That meant the entire load would be treated as regular garbage and sent to a landfill instead of a recycling facility. Mitsuko felt a pang of regret. Tanaka Industries prided itself on sustainability, yet this waste mishandling would cost extra fees and harm the company's green efforts. She knew that correcting it required more than just moving bags around. It meant changing the system. She set down her broom by the recycling corner and searched the nearby shelves for a roll of clear recycling bags. As she rummaged, the afternoon shift supervisor, Ms. Sakamoto, walked by, glancing curiously at the cleaning cart. "You're always so thorough," Ms. Sakamoto said with a smile. "Have you finished with the lobby?" Mitsuko glanced up and returned the smile. "Almost. Just organizing supplies here." She held up the roll of clear bags and pointed to the recycling bags behind Ms. Sakamoto. "I noticed these were in the wrong bags. If we want to recycle properly, we should use these clear bags so the waste center can sort them easily." Ms. Sakamoto frowned and looked at the pile. "I suppose we should?" She hesitated a moment, then nodded. "Thank you for catching that. I'll have to talk to the crew." Mitsuko watched as Ms. Sakamoto went to fetch a pair of gloves and started transferring the materials from the black bags into the clear ones. From where she stood, Mitsuko could see the warehouse crew pause to watch, curious about why the recycling bins were being emptied so suddenly. None of them asked why. They simply did the work. By the end of the hour, all the recycling was in clear bags, ready for pickup. Weeks later, recycling reports would show a 50% increase in materials diverted from the landfill, thanks to this small, unnoticed intervention. That afternoon, Mitsuko made her way to the second-floor finance department, where she knew the invoices were processed. As she tidied the desks, she spotted a manila folder lying open on the corner of a clerk's desk. She bent to pick it up and noticed that one of the sheets inside showed a billing error. A supplier's invoice had been entered under the wrong project code, leading to an overpayment of nearly 2 million yen. If left uncorrected, this error would skew the company's quarterly financial statements and potentially alarm investors. But today was Friday, and the accounting team was already counting down the hours until the weekend. They would likely overlook this mistake until Monday, by which time it might be buried under new tasks. Mitsuko carefully closed the folder and tucked it under her arm as she finished wiping the desk. She then marched briskly to the office of Mr. Hayashi, the chief accountant, who sat at a large desk piled high with papers. He was already packing his briefcase. "Excuse me," she called out softly. He looked up, half annoyed by the interruption. "Yes?" he replied. She held out the folder. "I found this invoice on the floor. I thought you might want to check it before the end of the week." Mr. Hayashi stared at her for a moment, then flipped open the folder and scanned the paper. His eyes widened. "This is an overpayment. How did you know to bring this to me?" Mitsuko simply smiled. "I always look out for things that could cause trouble later." He shook his head. "Thank you," he said quietly. He reached for the phone and called his team to cancel their weekend plans. They stayed late to adjust the billing codes and recoup the overpayment. By the time Mitsuko returned to her cleaning, she heard Mr. Hayashi speaking into the phone saying, "But thanks to a quick catch, we saved the company over 2 million yen. No one in that conversation suspected that the person responsible was the humble cleaner offering fresh towels to the restroom. Throughout that afternoon, Mitsuko moved from one department to the next, her mind cataloging small inefficiencies that might add up over time. A printer jam on the 5th floor that could be fixed with a simple part replacement, an outdated safety notice on a bulletin board, and a broken tile in the meeting room that could pose a tripping hazard. Each time she made a mental note to have these issues addressed. She did not crave praise or thanks. Finding and fixing problems without fanfare felt more satisfying. She believed that if things worked smoothly, the company would thrive, and her employees would remain safe and productive. During her rounds, she also noticed how people treated her. Some paused to offer a polite thank you, as she emptied a trash can. Others stepped around her without so much as a glance. A few muttered under their breath when she appeared near their desks. Yet none realized that the cleaner who mopped their floors and sorted their waste was also the person who held the company's future in her hands. She watched them, saw their interactions, their frustrations, and their small triumphs, and stored those observations like pieces of a puzzle. She understood, for instance, that Mr. Suzuki, the operations manager, was under immense pressure to meet production targets, and this stress affected his mood. She knew that Ms. Kuroda, the quality control lead, took pride in her meticulous checklists but struggled to coordinate with the finance team. These were not abstract names in a chart. They were people with hopes, fears, and daily challenges. By walking in their shoes, even if she wore a cleaner's uniform, Mitsuko felt she could help guide them more effectively when the time was right. As evening approached, the building grew quieter. The last of the office lights flicked off, and the cleaning crew gathered near the supply closet to clock out. They exchanged small talk about dinner plans and weekend errands. Mitsuko joined them, chatting briefly with her coworkers, though they seemed uneasy around her today, as if sensing she knew more than she let on. Mitsuko arrived at the factory floor early, as she did most mornings, wearing her familiar gray uniform. Only today felt different. The hum of machines usually welcomed her, but instead, a heavy silence hung in the air. Workers milled around the broken press, whispering anxiously to one another. The press was a massive piece of equipment, tall, metal, and essential for shaping the company's flagship product. Without it running, orders would back up quickly, and clients would notice the delay. Fear and frustration flickered across the faces of employees as they exchanged worried glances. Mitsuko joined the group, her mop abandoned beside a trash bin. She listened as the factory supervisor, Mr. Suzuki, explained the problem in low, tense tones to the other managers. "We tried everything last night," he said. His voice cracked. "The hydraulic system is shot, and we don't have a spare part on hand. I ordered one last night, but it won't arrive until tomorrow morning at best." A hush fell over the group, and someone whispered, "This is bad. Very bad." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of possible contract breaches hung over them like a dark cloud. Mitsuko studied the broken press without revealing how much she already knew. As a cleaner, she often mopped around these machines and observed them intimately, but today, she needed to step beyond her usual role. She took a deep breath and approached Mr. Suzuki, who looked up and furrowed his brow. He seemed surprised to see her there, dressed in her cleaning uniform instead of lurking in the shadows. "Good morning," she said softly, offering a polite bow. "I believe I can help with this problem." He blinked, confusion crossing his face. You can?" he stammered. Mitsuko nodded. "Last night I ordered the replacement part directly from our supplier with express shipping. It should arrive well before lunch." Mr. Suzuki's jaw dropped, and the other managers turned to her startled. "How did you order it? We didn't authorize any special purchases." Mitsuko kept her voice calm. "I noticed the breakdown last night during my rounds. I knew how critical this press was to production, so I acted immediately." She fished a printed confirmation from her apron pocket and handed it to him. "Here is the confirmation email. Notice the tracking number and expected delivery time." He scanned the document, his eyes widening further with each line. "This can't." "Free to," he murmured. "Who approved this order?" he demanded. Mitsuko inclined her head politely again. "Sometimes quick decisions are necessary to keep things moving. Our client's order is due soon, and any delays could cost us their trust." As the managers read the confirmation, they realized the part was indeed en route, and they murmured to one another in relief and disbelief. Word spread quickly across the factory floor. Workers who had been tense and worried suddenly straightened their backs. They exchanged glances, trying to figure out who had orchestrated this lifeline. No one could understand how a cleaner, a person far from the executive suite, had accessed the company's supplier portal and facilitated an emergency order. Whispers fluttered like birds through the crowd. Mitsuko, the cleaner, How could she do that? Does she have access to the company's secrets? Some employees looked at her with new respect, while others simply scratched their heads in confusion. Despite this attention, Mitsuko refused to puff up her chest or let pride show in her expression. Instead, she quietly returned to her cleaning cart and resumed her routine, silently confident that the crisis would pass. Later that afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the factory windows, a hum rose from the assembly line. The new part had arrived and the maintenance crew worked swiftly to install it. Within the hour, the press roared back to life with a powerful clank and whir. A cheer erupted from the gathered workers who slapped each other on the back and congratulated Mr. Suzuki. He stepped off the platform and wiped sweat from his brow, eyes scanning the crowd. Then he saw Mitsuko leaning against her cart, quietly smiling. He swallowed hard, walked over, and said in a voice that wavered between gratitude and astonishment, "You did this. You saved us." Mitsuko inclined her head. "I'm glad I could help," she said simply. Meanwhile, tension brewed upstairs. In the glass-walled executive suite, managers and directors gathered for what was supposed to be an urgent meeting about the press issue. The CEO, Mr. Tanaka, not related to Mitsuko, sat at the head of the table, flanked by the heads of finance, operations, and sales. They glared at stacks of printed reports showing shipping delays, penalty clauses in client contracts, and potential financial losses if production failed to resume. Mr. Tanaka drummed his fingers nervously on the tabletop. "We must find someone to hold accountable," he said. "Who authorized a rush order? Why was I not informed?" His tone was sharp, frustration spiking in his voice. The others shuffled papers and avoided eye contact. None dared mention that the order had come from a cleaner. Meanwhile, the CFO, Ms. Hayashi, kept glancing at her phone, perusing the real-time updates on her screen. At last, she cleared her throat. "Mr. Tanaka, the expedited part has been delivered, and the press is operational again. The financial impact will be far less severe than we feared." Mr. Tanaka let out a slow breath. "Then we must find whoever did this and bring them into this room for explanation." No one moved. He repeated, "I want to understand how a cleaning staff member could order such a critical part without approval." A long, tense silence settled over the room. Back on the factory floor, Mr. Suzuki and his team rejoiced quietly, aware that they might face scrutiny for the unauthorized purchase. Then, Mr. Tanaka himself appeared at the raised platform, flanked by his senior executives, including Ms. Hayashi and Mr. Kuroda, the head of quality control. The workers fell silent as he stepped forward, his gaze sweeping across them. "I have just been informed that the replacement part was ordered by a member of our cleaning staff," he announced, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Some heads snapped toward Mitsuko's corner, while others turned pale with confusion. "Is this true?" he asked. Mitsuko straightened, set aside her mop, and approached him calmly. "Yes," she replied softly. "I took it upon myself to arrange the order." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "How did you have the authority?" Mr. Tanaka demanded. Without hesitation, Mitsuko removed the cloth from her apron pocket. Revealing a business card, she handed it to him. "I am Mitsuko Tanaka," she said, her voice clear and steady. "The owner and founder of this company." Shock rippled like a wave through the gathered employees. Faces fell open in disbelief. Some clutched their chests as if afraid to breathe. Others simply stared, their mouths hanging slack. The CEO stared at the card, then at Mitsuko's uniform, his eyes widening. You are the owner?" he asked, voice cracking. Mitsuko bowed politely. "Yes. I have been coming here in secret for weeks to understand the company at every level," she said. "I wanted to know the realities of our operations before making decisions from above." A stunned silence followed. Nobody spoke. Workers exchanged astonished looks with managers, unable to process this revelation. The head of operations, Ms. Kuroda, blinked rapidly, her voice barely a whisper. But why? Why not announce yourself?" Mitsuko glanced around at the workers who stood frozen. mops gripped tightly in their hands as if they might drop them in surprise. She spoke gently. Leadership cannot come from a distance. I needed to know how things truly worked. From the ground up. I needed to see every flaw, every inefficiency, and every moment when someone's work was overlooked. The CEO cleared his throat, regaining a measure of composure. He turned to the assembled managers. We owe her an apology, he said gravely. We treated her as though she were invisible. Heads nodded in agreement. Mr. Suzuki, who had been pacing nervously, stepped forward. I am sorry, Miss Tanaka, he stammered. If I had known, I would have come to you first. Mitsuko shook her head. This is not about blame, she said. It is about understanding and respect. The CEO turned back toward her. Mitsuko, he said, using her given name for the first time, you have taught us a valuable lesson. We have judged you based on your uniform, not your abilities. For this, we are truly sorry. As she spoke, some workers began to realize how they had treated her. One young woman, a machine operator named Ayumi, stepped forward hesitantly. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I said on the radio yesterday that the cleaner must be lost wandering around. I didn't know it was you. Mitsuko smiled kindly. Thank you for saying that, she replied. Other employees began to open up, apologizing for the ways they had mocked or ignored her. None of them could believe they had been so blind. The room filled with murmurs of regret and rueful laughter as they thought back to the times they had brushed past her or whispered comments behind her back. A few managers who had been particularly dismissive looked ashamed, their faces flushed. Then the CEO raised his hand to quiet the gathering. Mitsuko, he said, would you like to tell us what you learned from this experience? She nodded. I learned that our greatest strength is when every person here feels valued. When we dismiss someone because of their role or their uniform, we lose out on their ideas and their potential. From now on, I want us to treat every member of this company with respect. Mitsuko returned to her role as company owner the very next morning, but the world she stepped into felt different. The corridors buzzed with activity, yet each person she passed offered a nod or a warm smile instead of casting dismissive glances. She could see surprise in their eyes when they realized she wore a business suit rather than her familiar gray uniform. Still, the polite greetings she received felt genuine. In the lobby, the receptionist curtsied and said, Good morning, Ms. Tanaka, welcome back. Mitsuko allowed herself a small, grateful smile. She had chosen to reveal her identity to teach her team about respect and humility, and already she saw that her message had taken root. Inside her spacious office, Mitsuko sat at her large oak desk and looked through the window at a group of employees gathered below. They stood near the flower pots she had arranged last week, pointing up at the building and talking quietly among themselves. Some wore their usual work attire, while others still clung to the idea that one among them had been both their cleaner and their owner. For weeks, gossip had circled, and now the rumor had become a shared lesson in humility. She thought back to the day she had revealed the truth and felt a warm glow in her chest. It had been the moment when she saw their eyes open to the possibility that assumptions could hide real talent. Now, as she put on her glasses and studied the morning briefing reports, she felt eager to turn lessons into lasting change. Her first task was to meet with the human resources team, including the head of HR, Ms. Inoue, and the junior recruiter, Aya. They had once whispered about her in the break room, assuming she understood nothing about staffing. Now they considered her a leader who valued every role. Sitting across from her desk, Ms. Inoue shifted in her seat, embarrassed by her earlier remarks. Ms. Tanaka, she began, I want to apologize for underestimating you. We have already drafted a new policy about mutual respect and zero tolerance for disrespectful comments. Aya nodded, her eyes shining with sincerity. We want to create an environment where everyone understands that our worth is not defined by our job title, she added. Mitsuko felt a sense of relief. These women, who had once scoffed at her presence, now spoke of building a culture of respect. She knew that accepting their apology and supporting their new policy would send a strong message to the entire company. Next, she walked to the operations floor, where Mr. Suzuki and his team were reviewing the press repair's performance. As she entered, they paused their discussion and straightened in unison. Mr. Suzuki stepped forward, slightly nervous but determined. "Ms. Tanaka, I want to thank you again for stepping in when the press broke down. Your quick action saved us from major delays." Mitsuko nodded graciously. "I was simply doing what needed to be done, but I want us to talk about how to prevent such surprises." The team looked curious. She went on, "I want a cross-functional committee that includes representatives from maintenance, finance, and cleaning staff. This group will meet weekly to review machine health, budget forecasts, and facility upkeep. By sharing information, we can avoid breakdowns before they happen." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Mr. Suzuki smiled, relief spreading across his face. He had always known she had strategic insight. Now he felt honored to work with her openly. After leaving the operations floor, Mitsuko headed to the warehouse to check on recycling and waste management. She found Ms. Sakamoto and Mr. Kimura organizing supplies. They had implemented the clear bag system she suggested days earlier. Boxes of shredded paper and sorted recyclables lined the corner by the loading dock. Ms. Sakamoto looked up and greeted her with enthusiasm. "We've already seen a 10% decrease in waste costs," she said. "The recycling plant picked up our first clear bag shipment yesterday." Mitsuko was pleased but remained humble. "Thank you for taking action so promptly," she said. "Please keep tracking the numbers. I want to know how much energy and materials we save each month." Mr. Kimura nodded, and they walked together, inspecting the neatly stacked pallets. She noticed a small spill of packing foam on the floor. Bending down, she picked it up and tossed it into the recycling bin. A worker who had paused his work looked at her in surprise. "Ms. Tanaka, you don't need to do that," he said. She smiled. "It's helpful to stay involved," she replied simply. Late that morning, Mitsuko gathered her leadership team in the boardroom for a special meeting. The glass walls let sunlight stream in, casting warm patterns on the polished table. Each person sat with a notebook, attentive and eager. At the head of the table, Mitsuko spoke clearly. "We have learned that our decisions should be built on input from every level of this company. From now on, any major policy or budget decision will involve feedback from those who work on the front lines, including cleaning staff, maintenance, and junior employees." The head of finance, Ms. Hayashi, raised her hand. "We will establish a feedback portal where any employee can submit ideas or concerns anonymously if they choose." Mitsuko nodded in approval. "Excellent. We also need to schedule walking tours once a month. I will join a small group of employees, rotating through departments to see firsthand how each area operates." There was a collective murmur of excitement. For the first time, many of them felt like they had a stake in the company's success beyond their immediate job descriptions. As the meeting concluded, the vice president of sales, Mr. Nakamura, lingered behind. He had once waved her away when she offered to refill his water glass. Now he approached her and said, "Ms. Tanaka, I want to thank you for showing us what true leadership means. I realized I never listened to the voices beneath the top tables. I'd like to lead the group that visits each department next week." She smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Nakamura. Your experience in sales will be valuable when we gauge how our processes affect delivery schedules." He nodded earnestly, a sense of purpose replacing any lingering embarrassment from his earlier dismissiveness. By lunchtime, rumors of the new policies reached every corner of the building. In the cafeteria, employees gathered at tables animatedly discussing the changes. Some saw it as a chance to finally be heard. Others admitted that they regretted their past behavior. A group of interns passed Mitsuko's old cleaning cart, now repurposed as a recycling station. They laughed and reminisced about the day they realized the cleaner was the company owner. One said, "I remember thinking she must be lost. Now I know she was on a mission to teach us humility." Another replied, "I'll never judge someone by their uniform again." Their conversation drifted as lunch trays clattered and midday chatter filled the air. Mitsuko observed them from a distance, satisfied that her small undercover role had planted seeds of lasting change. In the afternoon, Mitsuko visited the design studio, where Aya, the junior graphic designer, worked. Aya had shown her kindness when she first arrived as a cleaner, and now she looked up at Mitsuko with admiration. "I'm so glad you revealed yourself," she said. "I learned that leadership and creativity can come from unexpected places." Mitsuko nodded, grateful for Aya's sincere words. "I want you to join the new creative think tank," she said. "Your perspective will help us design branding that truly reflects our values." Aya's eyes lit up. "Thank you. I'll do my best." As context, designers often focused on aesthetics without considering the company's heart. Mitsuko wanted to change that. Aya's presence would remind the team to weave respect and collaboration into every project. Later, as the sun dipped low, Mitsuko found a quiet moment in her office to reflect. She closed the blinds and sat by her desk, thinking about the journey she had taken. She remembered how she started with a small rental workshop, drafting business plans by candlelight. Over the years, she had learned to balance budgets, negotiate with suppliers, and inspire a small team of loyal workers. Yet she had never lost her curiosity about the people who cleaned floors, managed machines, and packed orders. By slipping into a gray uniform, she had discovered layers of her company that no chart could reveal. Now, as she listened to the distant hum of office lights and the soft clatter of keyboards, she felt deeply connected to every corner of her organization. After a long day, Mitsuko exited the building to head home. The evening air was cool and quiet, and the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky. She paused on the sidewalk and gazed up at her company's name carved above the main entrance. Tanaka Industries. A gentle breeze rustled the trees lining the street. She thought about tomorrow's walking tour, how she would meet new faces and hear their stories. As the owner, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, to keep listening, to keep learning, and to keep fostering respect at every level. She believed that a company thrived when everyone, from the boardroom to the break room, felt valued and heard. Over the next few weeks, the changes she initiated took root. The cross-functional committee began meeting weekly, and it quickly identified small inefficiencies like outdated safety signs and underused equipment that saved the company time and money. The feedback portal overflowed with suggestions. Someone proposed flexible hours to improve work-life balance. Another recommended a shade tree outside the warehouse entrance to cool the loading dock on hot days.